Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Sawyer. I'm the Superintendent of Schools of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. And this is the one school committee meeting each year that I have the pleasure of opening because we recently had the annual town election. And after the town election, the school committee reorganizes and selects its officers for the subsequent year. So my responsibility this evening is to take nominations for the chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee. So I will open the floor for nominations.
I'd like to nominate John Wenske.
Dr. McGee has nominated John Wenske. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, there needs to be a vote. It'll be a roll call vote because of the, do we have to do a roll call? On camera, we don't. So just, so we'll vote on John Wenske for chair of the school committee.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
So the aye, it's ayes, any nays, and it is unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Wenske, and I will turn it over to you at this point.
Okay, let's take nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Sandra Fritz for vice chairperson.
I second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Vote, all those in favor of Sandra Fritz as vice chair.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote, thank you. And then finally, I'd like to take nominations for secretary.
I'd like to nominate Lindsay Heffernan for secretary.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor of Lindsay Heffernan as a secretary.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now play musical chairs. The next item on our agenda is public participation. Tonight, nobody has expressed an interest in addressing the committee. However, in the future, if anyone wishes to participate in this portion of our meeting, you should contact the chairperson prior to the beginning of the meeting. Once recognized, speakers will have up to 3 minutes to present their material. The committee will also review and consider written comments which may be presented to us before and after the meetings. The next item on our agenda is chairpersons and members' reports. Colleagues, it's been an eventful week. Anything to share this week? Mr. Palich.
As I imagine a number of my colleagues are this evening, I want to begin by thanking the residents of our town for their passage of an operational override to support, among municipal services, also to provide substantial additional support to Shrewsbury Public Schools to enable us to provide the level of programming that we know our residents want and deserve. For our residents to have done this represents an investment in our community. Nobody likes to pay taxes. Nobody likes to pay more taxes. For our neighbors to have decided that they will pay more reflects their decision that their community of Shrewsbury is worth investing in and that they're going to do that. And I want to thank each and every resident of this community for making that choice by such a substantial margin. A lot of people played a role in making that happen, including most everybody in this room, but there's a couple of Shrewsbury residents that I just wanted to single out by name. Michelle Conlon, Ginger Conti, Jason Molina, Katie Treber, Ann Gray, Nancy Nelson, Christina Heffernan, Carrie Harrington, Rachel Sharifapour, Krista Dupre, Ellery Harrington, Corey Torres, Elizabeth Van Orden, Aaron Canzano, Beth Cassavant, Katrina Lallier, and Neil Heffernan, among dozens of other people, played an integral role in helping to communicate with our residents on a one-on-one basis about what this choice represented, and I just want to extend to those folks my heartfelt thanks.
Okay, any other comments?
I also am very grateful for the vote that the community took. I think that they're valuing what we value, and they voted not only to keep our schools as good as they are, but also to improve the way the government of Shrewsbury is undertaken and to lead us to a better future as well as preserving what we've got. So that's very important. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Sandy Fritz for not 1 but 2 years of service to this committee. It is a difficult job. You do an outstanding job doing it. You're an extraordinary communicator. You're very organized, and you served during the most difficult of times. And when the year ended, we asked you to do it again, and you did so with enthusiasm. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Stephanie, you good?
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I would also like to thank the voters and the families of Shrewsbury. I think this was such an important vote. 14 was extremely important, but I felt that this one was more important. And I want to thank Kevin Mizikar. He really provided that vision for us with the model, the stabilization override model that we're going to be using going forward. And Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Collins, who really helped us from the school committee perspective, where we needed to go to provide educational services going forward. Everyone involved in central office as we move forward, all of our staff. And when we were standing outside waiting for the vote, I think that's probably one of the most nervous times I have had as a school committee member, because so much was riding on this vote. But John and I were out there for a little bit, and there was a family from Patton who had come over, and there was I think she was a second grader at Patton. She was hysterical. She was smarter than all of us standing there. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. She knew exactly where she wanted to go to college. And when we were standing there, this is why we do this. This is why we support education in this community, and this is why we were pushing for this additional services that we need to go forward. So I'm so, so grateful for everybody in this room who helped. Jason, I know you and Lindsay put a ton of time and effort, Michelle Conlon, and all of the families and parents who helped get this passed. So a huge thank you to this community.
Thank you, Mrs. Fritz. Obviously, from my perspective, I want to express my gratitude to the voters of Shrewsbury, obviously, for maybe still being here. It's an honor to serve another 3 years, but also for your support, most importantly, for your support of the town and the passage of the operational override, not only for funding our future for public education, but for all town services. Really appreciate all the work that went into it. I'd like to thank the town manager, Kevin Mizikar, for his forward thinking and future financial planning, as well as the Board of Selectmen for the partnership in allowing the residents to make this decision and to vote on this question. It's very important to the future of the town, and I appreciate everybody involved, as my colleagues have acknowledged. Our role as school committee is to advocate for the betterment of Shrewsbury Public Schools. We can't do it alone, and we really appreciate the community's rallying behind the message, certainly, that we've been providing over the last several months. In addition, I'd like to thank Sandy Fritz for her work as chair over the last 2 years. It's been a long 24 months, I'm sure, and she'll say it's a team effort, and in many ways it is. But I watched the work behind the scenes, off camera, the multitude of sub-meetings with the Board of Selectmen, leadership, many subcommittees, whether it's the Beal Building Committee, redistricting subcommittee, and all the responses, the hundreds of responses to the emails, the phone calls, and the concerns from the community. It's really remarkable, and we experienced many challenges over the last 2 years, and really appreciate all the work that you've done for us. And I know I have big shoes to fill, so thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
So, the next item on our agenda is Superintendent's Report. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Wensky. Let me start by congratulating you on your reelection to the committee. I look forward to continued work together. I also want to echo what the members have said about Ms. Fritz and her service as chair for the last 2 years during what may have been the most complex time in the history of the Shrewsbury Public Schools. As superintendent, and superintendents always work very closely with the school committee chair, I could not have had a better support and communication and collaboration than with Ms. Fritz, and I deeply appreciate and will always be grateful for her leadership over this past 2-year period. I want to thank the entire school. I'd like to also thank Mr. Wensky for his service as vice chair during that time, and also Dr. McGee, the very effective and efficient secretary to the committee, and it's always timely with everything and helping my assistant Beth McCollum and making sure that minutes and everything we needed to have happened well. In terms of the override, I am enormously grateful to the community for supporting this through a yes vote. I'm grateful to the members of the Board of Selectmen, again to Mr. Mizikar, as you mentioned, for coming up with a very forward-looking plan that I think the community had trust and faith in because of how clearly it was presented, and that it makes a lot of sense for this community to create a stabilization fund that can help give stability to our budget over years to come, and that's critically important. Something we just have not had the opportunity to have, and certainly in many years. I also want to thank, again, Mr. Palich and Ms. Heffernan for their outreach through the ballot committee, Ms. Conlon, Michelle Conlon, for chairing that group, and all the people that Jason mentioned earlier. We could not have had the word get out, especially during the condensed time period that this required of about 10 weeks, and to reach out to voters to let them know what was at stake and to motivate them to vote. I'm thankful to Representative Hannah Kane for hosting myself and Mr. Mizikar on our television show, for her continued support of the work that we do as a school district and advocating for us at the state level, as well as to the Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association, the Shrewsbury Education Association, for their endorsement of this plan as well, and for the support of their members. This is really a real sea change for our community in the way we finance local government, that's going to provide some really significant benefits for our community and certainly for our schools. I also want to thank our leadership team, and in particular, Mr. Collins, the work that not only he does very publicly and transparently, that I think also has built a huge reservoir of trust for what we do financially as a school district, but also what he does that people don't see behind the scenes on a day-by-day basis, working to make sure everyone has what they need to not only run the district effectively, but also to make sure that that financial picture was clear, so that we could move forward towards this solution to a very difficult problem of a structural deficit. So again, I couldn't be more pleased and proud of this community. We're looking forward to many years ahead of being able to invest in our school district and our community. And regardless of whether someone voted yes or no, certainly our obligation that we take very seriously is to validate the trust the community has placed in us and make sure that we are investing wisely in the education of our town's children, and making sure that we're providing everything we can to make sure education in Shrewsbury is excellent and meets the standard that this community has set forth for us to reach. So thank you to the community. This is a very exciting time for us. Just a couple other things I want to mention. Did want to mention that last week was Teacher Appreciation Week and National Teacher Appreciation Day, which was serendipitously on the date of the election. What a great way to show appreciation for our educators, and certainly this year more than ever. Today is actually a National School Nurse Appreciation Day, and so we thank our school nurses who have done tremendous work. They always do, but particularly during this pandemic with all the additional demands that were placed upon them. And in particular, I want to thank Noelle Freeman, our Director of School Nursing, who has been an extraordinary leader during this time since last March, to help us through this pandemic in a way that has helped us support learning and education for kids by making sure that we're making good decisions when it comes to health and safety that are reasonable and thoughtful. So thank you to Ms. Freeman. Also want to mention that it is also National Police Week this week, and we have a really long-standing, very positive relationship with the Shrewsbury Police Department in terms of the work that they do with us, not only through the School Resource Officer Program that we have had in place for many years now, but also the ongoing work they do to help us prepare for any potential crises and making sure our drills are effective, to make sure as we're prepared as we could be for hopefully things that never happen. And then, occasionally, not frequently, thankfully, in this community, but occasionally we need to partner with the police on different issues that happen in the community that affect our school community somehow. And they've always been extremely responsive and very good communicators and collaborators. We know that's a very difficult job, and we appreciate the work that they do with us, as well as all of our community members who serve as police officers. And then finally, just want to wish the end of Ramadan is coming upon us, and wish all of our families who will be celebrating a happy Eid al-Fitr as they go forward and celebrate that holiday in the next day or two. So that is Superintendent's report this evening.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sawyer. The next item on the agenda is a time-scheduled appointment with an update on school district's response to pandemic and plans for reopening for full in-person learning. Dr. Sawyer and members of the leadership team will provide an update on the school district's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the district's plans for reopening for full in-person learning. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you. And I'll be flying solo tonight with this, and we'll keep it brief. It's a very, very good news story. I will begin with, again, the key messages because they're important and because I'm superstitious that if I stop saying these things will not go as well as they have been going. That the health and the well-being of our students and our families and our staff is always our first priority. That our focus this year has been to develop a safe school environment that prioritizes the well-being of all, but also enables high levels of learning for all. And we continue to focus on the guidance from our public health authorities and experts, from the State Department of Public Health, the Department of Education, as well as medical experts we've engaged with regard to the data in terms of what things look like in Shrewsbury and across the state. The numbers in the last few weeks have been excellent. This week so far, we have 2 cases. That gives us a total of 440 for the year as far as in-school cases. And in terms of possible exposure in school, that remains at 8. It's been there since early April. So a very small percentage that potentially were tied to some kind of in-school transmission. And we have held steady with 40 cases in our remote program. You can see that actually the last full week, we also only had 2 cases. These are the best numbers since we've had since the late summer, early fall. And so these are very small numbers given the probably going on 7,000 plus members of our school community who are in person. So it is, again, a good trend that we're seeing. We're seeing this across the state as well. This graph is just a line graph that shows you the numbers by week over the course of the school year. We started off at a very low level back in September, had the big spike in November and December that lingered into January, a little up and down there. Had a nice decline, another bump up in early March, and then really a very precipitous decline since then. And hopefully that line will flatline out close to 0 over the coming weeks of the remainder of the school year. This is the slide that shows you the cases by school, and this hasn't changed a whole lot since the last time. There's only been 5 cases since the last time I presented to you 2 weeks ago. So this is consistent. The slide after that shows you by grade level. Again, fairly evenly spread across grade levels other than our pre-K and K and 3rd grade. Otherwise, pretty consistent, and that will likely stay pretty similar the rest of the year given the fact that, that we expect to have a few cases going forward. This is the slide we've shown each time that shows we're now down to a 1.25% positivity rate in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Remains one of the best in the nation, and that's trended down a little bit over the last 2 weeks as well, so that's good direction. And right now for Shrewsbury, we're at 1.65% positivity rate as of the May 1st last report publicly by the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, suspected in-school transmission, only 8 cases and no suspected cases since early April. And at this point, I will just mention and thank, again, everyone involved with our return to full day, our full 5-day-a-week in-person learning for all families who wanted that. We finished our transition to that with the high school last week. It's gone very smoothly overall. And that's due to the very significant amount of preparation that the high school faculty and administration and support staff and custodians put into that work. These are a few photographs from the first day of full in-person learning. This is the Commons. So in a typical year, they'll be filled with cafeteria tables, individual desks that are spaced 6 feet apart because that's still the standard for when students are eating with their masks off. And of course, we can't, given that spacing, we can't fit all of our kids to eat just in the cafeteria. So we are also using the field house. So you can see that it is now filled with single desks. That's a picture from above of the students eating, and this is a photo from down below from the front of the room. So, and as you might imagine, just logistically, this is a challenge to pull off. And this photo was, students left very orderly way, directed by the folks who are running the show, then our custodians and our COVID assistants, sanitizing each desk in the very short amount of time between when the next wave of students comes in to eat their lunch. And they certainly are a well-oiled machine in doing that work. And that is happening certainly on the largest scale at the high school, but that's happening everywhere in all of our schools. And it's really quite an operation, but certainly worth it in order to have our students back to full in-person learning. And so, in conclusion, again, we've had a very successful return to full in-person learning across all of our grades now. Our students are very much benefiting from this. We'll continue to follow the guidance from experts to see if anything else evolves over the course of the next several weeks as we head towards the last day of school on June 18th. And excellent news that the rates of COVID-19 are very low at this point in our schools and in our community. And as a result, I think there's a high degree of confidence in people's safety We need to obviously stay the course and maintain our protocols until we're told that we do not have to do that. But right now, I think that there's a very optimistic sense in our schools because of this, as well as because of the positive vote from the community with the override. So that's the report this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Okay, well, I want to thank you for the consistency of this report every week. Really impressive to see the numbers improving. And I know as the parent of a freshman, certainly she's enjoyed being back in full and has reported only good things. So thank you to your leadership team and to everybody involved in getting our kids back in full. Awesome news. The next item on our agenda is another time-scheduled appointment. Mr. Collins is here to provide an elementary school redistricting and kindergarten update. Mr. Collins?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wensky. So tonight, be relatively brief, and honestly, there's not a lot of new information for the school committee. There's a few tidbits, but certainly want to confirm with our larger community that might be watching for our plans for elementary school redistricting with the upcoming new school year, and that this override has provided us the opportunity to fulfill our strategic plan with the space reconfiguration, and also implement Dr. Sawyer's fiscal '22 budget plan. So going to hit a few topics here in terms of a brief process review on the redistricting process, the implementation schedule, some parent resources that are available right now on our website in terms of the new elementary districts, and then also just confirming the kindergarten program for the upcoming school year. So in terms of a process review, again, we engaged in a just over a year-long decision-making process to conduct elementary school redistricting in conjunction with the opening of the new Beal School, in closure of the original Beal School here on 1 Maple Avenue. The school committee, to start that process, commissioned a redistricting committee. And that redistricting committee had parent representatives from each of the elementary schools, 2 principals, Mrs. Fritz, Mr. Wensky from the school committee. And we were guided during this process by established decision-making criteria that was called guiding principles. Very complex, difficult process and decision-making process to go through, a lot of different considerations, but we had guiding principles as decision-making criteria to weigh the various options that led us through the process. Also, we hired a Geographic Information Systems consultant, or a GIS consultant, to help us with all the data management and the mapping visualizations. These are new tools in the last 5 to 10 years that weren't available previously, that really helped in terms of communicating the various options to all of you and to our parent community and administrators as well. We held 2 virtual community forums during the wintertime, and those were opportunities for us the redistricting committee, to show the status of the planning and a variety of options that were being considered, and also an opportunity to receive feedback from parents along the way. And then finally, as you know, you took a vote on February 24th after careful consideration and updates along the way about progress and on options that would be available. And so that decision was made on February 24th. Just a quick note that all of those activities that I just referenced in terms of the community forums, the reports to the school committee, the guiding principles, all of that information is still available on our website under the Beal redistricting link. So if people want to go back and look at that process and the timeline that we engaged, all of that information is there. We'll keep it up for a little while, maybe the next 3 or 4 months, and then it will become old news and we'll take it down. But it's still available if people want to look at that. So the process resulted in this. This is a map of the new elementary zones. In the upper right northeast corner, in the yellow, is the Spring Street, the new Spring Street elementary zone. In the center, upper center in the green, is the new Patton Elementary School zone. And then going from the northwest corner down to the south central, that orange area, which spans both Route 9 and Route 20 and covers the entirety of the north to south geography of the town in orange, is the new Beal School Elementary Zone. It's the largest, of course, because that will now be our largest capacity elementary school with an enrollment capacity, design capacity for up to 790 students, which is just excellent. It's going to help resolve our elementary space problems at all of our elementary schools. And then in the southwest corner here, in the pink or purple color, is the Coolidge School Elementary Zone. So that was the resulting impact of the process. Moving on to implementation schedule. You know this, and now all of our elementary schools for the upcoming school year, start with the upcoming school year. We will have, all elementary schools now have K through 4 education. So we're basically eliminating one school transition that was in place with the early education model, all kids going to kindergarten for Beal, and then going off to their elementary school. That's now been eliminated, of course, and students will attend their K through 4 education at their newly assigned elementary school. Parents will get a letter, hard copy letter through the U.S. mail. This says mid-May. Actually, we're a little bit ahead, so those letters are sitting in the office now. We'll finish those tomorrow. We'll put them in the mail tomorrow. So tomorrow, Thursday. So parents ought to be getting these letters in their mailboxes, probably Saturday, Monday at the latest. And it's going to be a personalized letter saying, your son or daughter is now assigned to Patton, Spring, Floral, or Beal School. So we wanted to, really reach out in a positive way. We know that there's been lots and lots of communication, but still yet, parents are living busy lives during COVID, and there's some certain percentage of people that are just not connected to what's going on. I don't know what that percentage is, but with this letter, we're certainly going to confirm what their new elementary school assignment will be. Further on into the implementation is certainly over the summertime, we'll be hosting, each of the elementary principals will be hosting an open house type activity to welcome students into their school. Again, for a fair number of students, there's going to be no change, but also for all the students that are going to be attending Beal, that will certainly be a change. But yet, all elementary schools will have some sort of open house assignments, and certainly the new teacher or upcoming school year teacher assignments will be communicated as well. So there'll still yet be more communication happening even after this letter, of course. And then our plan is to hopefully by the middle to latter part of next week is open up school bus registration for next year. And of course, we had to wait until the override, until we could confirm what our plans were with, fully opening Beal School and being able to conduct this redistricting plan, having the budget to be able to do that. So now that that's confirmed, we'll send out these letters about the elementary school assignments so people will know where their child's going to school. And then we'll open up bus registration so people can make an informed decision about whether or not they want their child to take the bus. And I would highly encourage parents to take the bus. We've certainly, and parents who have been driving their child most recently to school after kind of full reopening of school knows that there's been some very long parent drop-off and pickup lines. And that certainly can be eliminated if their child is riding the bus, so we would encourage that. Going on to some parent resources. Again, we'll be communicating this information in the second bullet point about an interactive map. That's available on our website right now. So these elementary school zones is not some sort of information that we're holding close to the vest or this letter. People right now who would like to look on our website can look at an interactive map. This was one of the byproducts of hiring the consultant AppGeo. They were able to provide us a file that integrated with the town GIS system And so parents can look on our website, they can zoom in on their street, their house, their parcel, and see what elementary school they're assigned to. There's also a feature in the upper left where they can put in their address or the property owner's name. So there's a whole host of ways for people to do this very easily on their own right now by going to our website. And if they clicked on our main website, they can look at the news item, and you'll see there, searchable map for new elementary school zones. But beyond that, we'll continue to communicate, again, through the community bulletin, the principal weekly communications, and just keep talking to people about this. And that's all just going to be kind of supplemental information to make sure people are fully aware. Moving on to a little bit of a shift in topic now from the elementary redistricting into the kindergarten program. Certainly starting with this upcoming school year, again, very excited that we now have space, adequate space, for full-day kindergarten for all students. No longer do we need a lottery. The school committee was proactive several years ago in bringing the tuition fee down, so there will be no tuition for the upcoming school year, full-day kindergarten for all students, and we're really excited about that. And the kindergarten registration process, which is kind of the more formal online registration process for parents to register their child for kindergarten for the upcoming school year, that portal will be open next week, hopefully Monday, but early next week, and they'll be able to formally register their child for kindergarten. Again, we had to kind of wait for a series of events to happen in order to open that up, but that will be open next week, and we highly encourage parents to register their child for kindergarten as soon as possible so we can get our numbers solidified in class rosters and teacher assignments and things like that. So that's the update for all of you as a school committee and also the community at large, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you, Mr. Collins. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Ms. Heppen?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's obviously so exciting to be able to fulfill the promise of full-day K, but just a couple of questions about it for, mostly for the community to make sure they understand sort of what's happening. Clearly seeking parents, and I love when we can find a side benefit of COVID, like online registration for kindergarten and making lives easier for people. And so I remember standing there with my paperwork and just having a certain number of hours in a window to do it. So thank you. Kudos to make, I think that's a great step forward. But just wondering, for the parents who have not registered their children for kindergarten, I'm guessing, are they not then on our list to know which school they're going to? I'm thinking about those who you said who aren't paying attention. And
Yeah.
what kind of communication do they get from the registrar that this is open or it's coming, or does the town sort of proactively reach out? We also know that we had more parents than usual hold back their kids for kindergarten, so I'm just thinking about that gap and what we might be doing to address it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what we do on an annual basis, traditionally, this is not a COVID-related thing, is get information from the town clerk's office relative to census data. And so we know that when children are age eligible to enroll in kindergarten, we have their parent, their names and their parent names and their addresses, and we send out communication, we send out a letter to them, inviting them into the kindergarten program in the public schools, and ask them then to share more information like their email address so that we can provide ongoing information. So that process already happened several weeks ago in terms of reaching out and starting to gain the tools to communicate with them effectively. So another way to say this would be that we're going to use that email, those emails from the people that responded to that mailing, to let them know that they can now formally enroll their child through the student registration process.
Okay.
So it's really through census data.
Right.
We're able to reach out to folks through our website, And those are kind of the primary means that we're trying to do the outreach.
I can only assume for our planning purposes, the sooner people can get registered, the easier it is for class assignments and everything else, whatever we can do to support that. And just one other question, and it's mostly about the way things were ordered on the slides. I just want to make sure expectations for parents are clear. Teacher assignments are a big deal. Everyone wants to know who their teacher is. It almost made it seem like teacher assignments were coming sooner. And I thought as a community, we had shifted, or as a district, we had shifted. It used to be last day of the school, you'd learn who the next year's teachers would, or although things would shift. And I understand we moved predominantly to logging into Power School mid-August, and that's when we find teacher assignments. But it was sort of cascaded in there like around bus registration. I just want to make sure we haven't made a shift. Parents should expect teacher assignments are mid-August. You're doing a lot of work on that, but
Yes.
we haven't changed that.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's
No.
absolutely still the case.
They would have been calling you, I think, wondering who the teachers were. So thank you very much. And I would have been in that group of people as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Colleagues, Mr. Palick.
Just a comment on the kindergarten program and the enormity of what this community did last week. Tuition-free kindergarten for all students who want it is a dream long deferred in this community. We are one of the last communities to offer this service. As a dollar amount, it was not a substantial portion of what voters approved last week, but nonetheless, the ability to utilize the new Beal School building to its full potential to provide tuition-free kindergarten to all students who want it is the realization of something that this committee has been talking about for years. One of the few areas where public education in this community was behind the curve in the Commonwealth. So I just want to highlight the enormity of that step and what that means for this community. It's a dream that I think has been pursued by a lot of people in this room for many years, and I think it will mean a great deal for Shrewsbury families for many years to come. So thank you to everyone who helped to make that happen.
Great. Any other questions or comments, Mrs. Fritz?
I think it's exciting to see Bill open because this was actually put off longer than we really wanted because of the 14 issues and the override and worrying about having to have a new school on top of the issues with that financial crisis in 14. So now we're finally getting to where we're opening the school, we're alleviating the overcrowding, and as Jason said, the finally being able to have free full-day kindergarten for everyone, where most of the state has been doing that for a long time. And I think the wisdom of looking at slowly reducing that fee so that we didn't have a funding cliff to encounter all at once was a smart move. Mr. Collins had started that, we all agreed to it. I think that was a very wise financial position that we all decided to take. So this is really exciting for all of us and for the community going forward, and it's a beautiful building. Anybody, we've seen it, and I hope, Dr. Sawyer, did you get there yet?
Not yet.
You still have it.
It's on my list.
And it's an amazing building for anybody who is, the children are going to be able to go there. So just a really exciting time.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, I'd like to thank you for all the work on the redistricting, including the work with AppGeo. For those that are curious about where their students might be assigned in terms of elementary school, I encourage you to go to our website and see the return on investment that AppGeo provides with the interactive map that is there. I actually went through it today, just searched around the different neighborhoods. It's very easy, so definitely encourage that. It is also nice to hear the term free full-day kindergarten for all families. It's nice to be on the other side of this now and make that a reality. No lottery, space is available. All eligible enrolled kindergarten students are welcome. I mean, it's great. So thank you to everybody involved putting this together. This is great. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
First off, I concur with everything that's been said. I want to thank Mr. Collins for the work he's done to move this forward operationally. I also want to let the community know that we have been hard at work for months planning to launch this new school and to make this redistricting work. And we essentially had to place a bet that the community would support us so we could move forward once it was clear that we would have the funding to open the new school and execute around the redistricting. And the other members of the leadership team in this room have been hard at work, whether that's Ms. Clowder looking at curriculum materials and how we're going to organize to make sure those are spread appropriately as we have kindergarten in Floral Street for the first time and spreading our K-4 across now these 5 schools. Ms. Belcito working with her team regarding assignments of students or special education, making sure that all the personnel are going to be appropriately placed in all the buildings to make sure we can provide those services. And in particular, Ms. Malone who has been working diligently with the elementary principal team to orchestrate the whole piece in a fair way, getting preferences from teachers who may be looking for a transfer to the new Beal and wanting to go to this new experience, who wanted to remain in their current school, how we can match that up against what our needs are. And that's all falling into place very nicely. But a lot of that work had to be done ahead of time, of course, and now we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And our elementary principal team, they had always been a very cohesive and collaborative group. But during the pandemic, that's one of the silver linings for sure, is just the amount of collaboration that the principals, along with the curriculum coordinator, instructional coaches at the elementary level, and they've been working nonstop around hiring. We are in a position where we had a lot of long-term sub teachers we hired this year because of the pandemic, because we had to split into the remote and in-person pieces. We identified some really great candidates through that. We have some outstanding external candidates, and we're in the process. Mr. Girardi right now is running a search for the assistant principal at the new Beal School. There's 3 very strong finalists. There was a public forum last evening. I know they're in site visit mode right now, and probably within the next week plus, we will have the individual identified who will be the first assistant principal at the new Beal School, and the second ever assistant principal at the elementary level in the Shrewsbury Public Schools. So an enormous amount of work happening during what's a busy time of year anyway. But I really appreciate all the leadership teamwork that's happening so that we can make this all a reality for students in the fall. So we're very excited. This is a great news story for our community.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sawyer. The next item on our agenda is under curriculum. It's a summer programming update. We'll have a presentation on information on current plans for summer programming for students who need various types of extra supports. Here joining us today is Miss Amy Clowder, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, and Miss Meg Balsito, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to describe what's in the works for summer programming. I'm grateful to share the floor with my colleague Meg Balsito, the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. Since the programming I'm about to describe is newer and hers is a little bit more familiar, I'm going to go first. And so with that, I'll let you in on what we've been doing behind the scenes to prepare for yet another new initiative. The Chinese have a famous saying, Kennedy has slightly misquoted it here, but the gist of the translation is accurate, according to Chin Wei-Ye, who confirmed it for me. Crisis is the opportunity to make change. And the crisis that we've weathered in the past year has challenged teachers and students and families, yet it's also supported and even hastened some of the efforts that have been underway as part of our strategic planning. As you know, in my last presentation, I talked about the universal screening tool and the data that's helped us put interventions in place for students. That same data is now presenting us with an opportunity to use that information and extend support for kids into the summer. And so increased attention to student learning time has resulted in kind of a long-term perspective about how we can best support students as we weather kind of the impact of the pandemic. And as we're talking about summer tonight, we are really excited about being able to anticipate supporting students beyond just a summer program and well into next year. But first, let me talk a little bit about what's planned for this summer. So when we think about supporting students, educators in Shrewsbury have always seen summer as an opportunity to reinforce and expand learning. Summer reading programs have a long history in both the schools and the Shrewsbury Public Library, and we're grateful for community partners that serve as lifelines for families when school's out of session. So I just want to shout out to the Shrewsbury Public Library, who's not open, but very much engaged in supporting our readers of all ages, and not just in reading. And similarly, the town's running one-week sessions on-site at Floral over the summer in the morning with visits to Sunset Beach in the afternoon, and lots of families really avail themselves of the Parks and Rec programming. So we're excited about the potential to partner more purposefully this summer. We're still working out how we might do that and what those possibilities are. But one of the things you may have heard in the news is kind of this encouragement at the state level about nesting kind of community outreach together. And so we'd like to do that to the extent we can. Our task tonight is to focus on school offerings, and so I'm going to focus on academic programming for general education, and Meg will describe the special education program And together, we'll tell you about what's in store for students with the caveat that we're still actively planning. So the goal here is to support every student, and it might be helpful as thinking about the offerings in tiers. And you thought we'd retired that word with the budget solutions behind us, but we take pride in the resources we've developed for students, and it's always gratifying to see students and families engaging together in learning. The past year, we expanded the resources available to families to include free access to adoptive software. And students in Shrewsbury will have continued access to those learning tools like ST Math, Freckle, and Alex for our older students. But for the first time, we'll be able to offer in-person general education supports as well. When I first started in Shrewsbury at Coolidge, grant funding allowed for literary or language support for select populations. But then we saw subsequently over time, beginning in 2019, the reduction of those grant allocations limited our ability to do that. And we prioritized spending those dollars on in-person supports during the year. The funds that are available through ESSER now will enable us to offer a second tier of support again, and not only for EL students and those participating in reading supports. So in addition to online tools in summer reading and the activity calendars that keep kids engaged in physical activity and the arts as well, selected students will be invited to attend a 2-week program for focused literacy under math support. So what will invitees experience? It will vary by level, but in general, we're looking to target the skills that are most impactful for progress to the next grade, or in other words, the priority standards in reading, writing, and math. We're also really looking to limit group size for K-2 to 10 students, if that's possible, or no more than 15 in grades 3 and 4, to ensure more individualized attention. And across all the grades, the idea is to use small group supports matched to individual needs as the instructional model. And at the same time, we want kids to interact with each other and have fun. So social emotional learning activities and whole group experiences will be integrated into the day too at various points. So we've got about 40 classroom spaces available at Oak. When we think about how we might match that to student needs, we began kind of looking at the roster of students we identified as being most in need and thought, well, if we had to offer this opportunity, who would we first offer it to? And then we tried to figure out would they fit within the space we have. And so for K-8, the day will begin at 8:30, and it will be structured in 3 chunks. There's a morning session, there will be a break for lunch, and an afternoon session. And within each session, there'll be time for movement and mask breaks. The 2 sessions will have different content, but most students will identified for the program as we looked at the roster really would benefit from support in both literacy and math, so families who are invited should plan for a full day. With the recent reopening and other events like AP exams, MCAS testing at graduation, we face some logistical challenges getting the high school team together to think about programming at the high school, but we have decided that those programs would be at the high school as opposed to being on the one campus with Oak. So if you think about the extended school year program being at Sherwood and the general education program being at Oak, we're hoping that we have one campus for K-8, and then high school students would attend to the high school for any programming that we're able to offer there. So you can see we want to make sure that we have nursing on site because we're going to anticipate that we'll have COVID protocols remaining in place. For English learners, they'll start a week earlier on July 19th, and then the general education program will run the last week of July and the first week of August. So for EL learners, they'd have 3 weeks of support. And we'd be looking for 2 sessions every day with social emotional learning integrated. So that's the basic structure, K-8. And then overlaid with kind of who would be invited to participate. So we looked at the STAR data, we looked at DRA data, we looked at anecdotal data about students that were struggling from a teacher perspective, as you know, captured on report cards or in early intervening team records. And you can see these are the numbers of guests we'd want to invite by grade. And then based on the ideal configurations of 10 students in a grouping For K1 and 2, 15 students in groupings for 3 and 4, and a team model at the middle level, how many staff that we would need, if everything works perfectly. So this is where the kind of the complexity of the planning comes into play, because if you think about hosting a dinner party, you plan for the most possible that people could eat, right? But you don't really know if everybody's going to like all your offerings, so you might end up with leftovers. We've never really offered this scale of programming, so we don't know kind of what the no thank you rate might be. I hope it would be really small, but that would certainly shift the staffing. Similarly, we don't really know whether we'd be able to staff that larger program, because that's a lot of teachers or paraprofessionals. So thinking about, based on how many staff that we need, we might need to scale back this list. And so as we are simultaneously reaching out to families, we're also reaching out to staff, and we have to make those two things match. The other piece about the programming model that's really important is that we're looking to try to continue the program that's most familiar to students in order to make this seem more familiar and engaging. So for students that are 4th grade, they would come to the summer program and experience guided reading as they have up until the end of this year. For students who have experienced the team model at the middle level in grades 5, 6, and up, they would have a 2-person team supporting them. So we'd still have small groupings, but the configurations would mirror what they're used to in their current setup right now, as opposed to taking our rising 5th graders and putting them into a team model that seems unfamiliar. I just lost my, that's okay, we don't look up there. So one of the things that I just wanted to mention is, when I look at what other districts are doing, because I really value learning from the collaborations with other colleagues in districts, and we're all inventing something new. Some districts are calling this program kind of like a boot camp. And I just feel like that connotation makes it seem like it's not as joyful as school is. So our overarching goal, before we started even thinking about what the model would look like, was to say, let's make sure this is joyful. Let's mimic the kind of quality program that students and families have come to expect during the day, so that trying to replicate the model that kids are most familiar with comes from that thinking. And I want people to understand we're looking at having a small group model targeted to what we know about what kids' needs are, but also integrating masks in a fun way. How many hula hoops do we have that we can bring over there for skip counting? How can we integrate the arts and projects and choice into some of these options? Because although we were going to be targeting specific skills by grade, we're also going to make sure that we give students reading choices, help register them for the Beanstack app that the Shrewsbury Public Library is going to be encouraging people to do, and trying to very thoughtfully link efforts so that students can experience a range of supports. So if we think about this, I want to make sure I put in a plug for the Shrewsbury Public Library, because they have a richness of programs designed specifically for grade spans, kind of both younger students and then the tween and teen set. And so they have an app that Brian and I are working to try to make easy for kids to install, so that they can access a reading monitoring tool. And the number of minutes that they record, much like a Fitbit, kind of then links to kind of incentives at the library. The library will have kind of weekly Tuesday take-home kits starting at the end of June and running through August. And then a take and make kit for the teens. And then also kind of choose your own adventure, storytelling happening at Lake Street Park, and also a calendar events that are kind of one-time only events that live on their calendar. So I'd encourage families that are watching, kind of click on that link and open that calendar and take a look at some of those things. Because when we think library, we think reading, but I think one of the things that's really happened as a result of the pandemic is everyone's gotten really creative about how do we reach the audience of readers and how do we encourage reading in lots of ways. So there's a lot of resources reflected in their programming that I think go well beyond focused on literature alone. On the right, you can see a sample of kind of what a daily schedule for a student might look like. So in terms of integrating SEL, there would be kind of a meeting gathering, a whole group activity, or kickoff of the day, an instructional block, and then a break, and then another instructional break block, and then lunch. Students will not, we won't have bagged lunches available in the program. Students will bring lunch from home. But we will observe all the safety protocols that we have in place for lunches now and space kids apart. Then the afternoon session would resume. We would end the day with kind of a closing activity. And similar to, we're not planning on providing transportation unless there's a demonstrated hardship. So in terms of what's available to all kids, when we think about students in this general education program, we want them to take advantage of what's happening at the library and the reading programs and other supports in place for every child in Shrewsbury, but we want them to get more when they attend the program. So it's not one or the other. It's every student will get this baseline of resources, from the adaptive software to summer reading experiences, and then students in the general education program will get that, and then in-person instruction. So I also want to say that these are exciting times with a lot of things happening. We have really great problems to solve. But we have the numbers of students established, and the next step is to really post positions and issue invitations to students and kind of manage that list. At every level, we have kind of a priority list, and then if these students aren't interested, here's the next list we would go to list. And staffing might be a challenge, because for the first time, we're trying to staff 2 programs simultaneously, although Meg's runs longer than mine. We'd be looking for an extraordinary number of classroom teachers at a time when classroom teachers are often using the summer to invest in their own learning, or to take another job, or just, put their feet up after an extraordinary couple of years. So I'm hopeful that we'll have literacy tutors and classroom teachers that are interested in these positions, particularly because summer enrichment, which is always a wonderful program, is not running this summer, and so we're hoping some of those folks will be interested. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, there's a vision for summer programming that's integrated, but we're still waiting on guidance from DESE to be updated, where they still have kind of the guidance from last year is out there. They have a webinar scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, and I'm hopeful that there will be some more information about the community partnership initiative that the governor and the commissioner described recently. But I'm really grateful that, within Shrewsbury, we don't necessarily have to wait on outside agencies to kind of give us some guidance. Priya Rathnam and her team at the Shrewsbury Public Library, Angela Snell and her team at Public Facilities and Parks, and Keith Baldinger and his team at Public Buildings have really already helped with communication and space thinking and other related needs. So I'm very grateful to them, as well as to our principals who have been kind of looking at this through a new lens and building the IDEAL program with me and with the instructional coaches and coordinators. So I'm going to turn it over now to Meg to talk about the extended school year program. And based on what I know of her leadership and her team, I'm sure her work in progress is farther along. But I appreciate the opportunity to do more for our students, and I'm excited about what's going to happen next.
So now I'll talk about the extended school year services, which all of you are familiar with. But for people that at home or anybody listening that is not familiar with it, extended school year programs are not summer school. It's important that people understand that it's considered a longer school year or an extension of the school year. And as a point of clarification, school districts cannot categorically refuse to consider extended school year programs because districts do not offer summer school to all children. So that's something that I think is important to note. What Amy's referring to for this summer and extended school year for us, we do not want to deny any kind of access if a child has a disability and qualifies for essentially both programs. So I'm going to talk through how you qualify for extended school year services, but I did want to note that Amy and I we've been in conversation a number of times this week about the roster of children for the general education program and what that would look like if they qualify for any kind of special education service, and if a family chose to choose one or the other, choose both, and how we're going to work through those pieces. So our purpose for the extended school year program, as you know, we're committed to ensuring that all students with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education. Those are terms, FAPE, that we use often in our work. For some students, FAPE may require provision of special education services beyond the academic school year. So the purpose is to ensure that the student's IEP benefits achieved during the school year are not significantly jeopardized, and that's key to remember, during a lapse in programming in the summer months. The extended school year is not to address IEP goals and benchmarks that a student has failed to achieve during the year, or to provide a new type of educational benefit. Extended school year services should not be equal to the amount of services provided to a student during the school year. So those are just some key points around our purpose for extended school year programming. All children, as we know, possibly lose progress, forget, revert to a previous behavior to some extent between school years. That is quite typical. We use the following definitions in order to determine how a student qualifies for an extended school year program. So regression and recoupment, when we talk to families about this is when a student is unable to maintain an acquired skill when special education instruction or related services are interrupted. The student requires a significant amount of time to recoup lost skills. And we actually have data collection forms that our staff use in order to discuss this with families if this is one possible thing that a child is struggling with. Nature and severity of disability, the student requires more consistent and highly structured programming without substantial breaks in order to make progress in an identified area of concern. If the student doesn't receive these kinds of services, they will suffer significant loss of skills or behavior and is more vulnerable to the loss when school programming is interrupted. This particular category, we really think of our students with more significant special needs and that have a high level of programming throughout the school year. The other or last area that we look at are the critical stages and areas of learning. For this, a student, an extended break in instruction at this stage will jeopardize critical skill development. The student will suffer significant lost skills, behavior, or opportunities essential for promotion and maintenance of the student's self-sufficiency. So those are pretty detailed, and what we go through each year with our staff and with our families, the data collection forms to talk about the very category, and a student may actually qualify in more than one area or just one area. So what is our extended school year story? Throughout our school year, this year, our coordinators for extended school year and our special education leadership team meet monthly. So we've been talking about staffing, program organization, student recommendations, and qualifications for services since the beginning of the school year. Student recommendation forms have already been reviewed, and we've used these to develop programming for the students who are going to require this longer year. The six-week programming needs are determined based on the recommendations in order to prepare for our July 6th start. So we're looking to have the program from July 6th to August 12th. We're holding all levels at Sherwood this year, so pre-K through 12. So that's slightly different than what you had mentioned, Amy. We will have our high school students at Sherwood.
Okay.
With the exception of some additional programming that we are currently talking about with some more detail to come for some high school students with an opportunity at the high school. We have academic half-day. We have full-day programming. We will have walk-in services for reading, related services like speech, OT, physical therapy, and adaptive physical education. In FY20, we budgeted for about $620,000 for this programming. Obviously, last year, we came back from the closure, and it looked very different in our summer programming because we had a large number of students that stayed remote. We had a number of students that did come back with the most significant needs. And so the budget numbers for last summer, you know, I always look to Patrick for all of these different pieces, but it obviously contributed to a change in what it would have looked like in years prior. We're looking at our typical about 100 assistants that would be needed, whether that's applied behavior technicians, child-specific aides. We will need our moderate and severe special education teachers. We will also require ELC coordinators. and related service providers. We're looking at about 6 related service providers right now. So some key factors this year that we really need to talk about are the strong recommendation for in-person services. The Department of Education stated in March that they recommend students receive as much in-person learning as possible during the summer of 2021. Schools and districts should plan for an in-person model for services that are a direct extension of our school year, and schools and districts are required to provide such extended school year services as typical. We were also told to notify any remote families that we will schedule in person, and also we would need them to reach out to us and let us know if they still require some level of remote. Our strong suggestion to all families that are currently remote, our guidance right now, and it's not confirmed or out there publicly yet, but so far verbally, we have heard that students really truly will need medical documentation in order to stay remote next year. So we are looking to transition as many students that are still remote back to in-person learning for this summer if they qualified for the service. And we worked through that survey with families just recently. I believe the survey closed last week, so we're working through. We only had about 40 to 50 families that we needed to survey, and of that, I believe so far, about half are coming back in person, and then we're waiting on some other answers and responses. The other piece this summer that we have been working through has to do with the COVID compensatory services. The need for COVID compensatory services, it is individualized, has to be data-based, and a team determination. So our teams have worked through what is COVID compensatory services, what does this look like for students, and we had to consider whether some or all the student services were not or could not be implemented or accessed during the closure. So we're thinking about last April to June. So it was a lot for our teams to meet with the families throughout the course of this school year and have the conversations about last April to June. But we did work through that. We do have some students that are going to require some additional services in this particular area, and we're looking to support those services during this summertime. COVID compensatory services are needed to remedy a student's skill or knowledge or lack of effective progress that resulted from the delayed, interrupted, suspended, or inability to access IEP services because of the closure. So these determinations will be made, used from multiple sources, including information from parents and families. To date, we have about 20 students who will require this, and like I said, we do have some students that are still currently remote.
So in closing, we've learned a lot this year, and we see the summer programming as another learning opportunity, both to see how we can better support families and students, and also how to think about interventions that we carry forward into more supports during the year next year. In the coming week, we plan to issue invitations to students and families and plan with their responses in mind. So it's important for families listening to know that if you're invited, we need to hear back from you one way or the other, because just like planning for reopening, knowing the student numbers is critical in order to determine the staffing plan. English learners and families of students with disabilities should look for specific communications from those departments. And, last year we created kind of a refrigerator card with a QR code to help make it easy for families to remember how to access some of the summer reading supports that are available for everybody, as well as some of the learning links and other calendars to focus on math skills. So we'll develop that again. So look for that coming in June.
And I forgot to mention, if you go back, Brian, to note this slide right here, we have about 280 students that have qualified this summer for services, and those parents were notified actually today with specific information about the programming that I described earlier. And I did want to point out that when we put this together, this particular information we shared with staff a little over a month ago, we have about 967, so close to 1,000 students with disabilities. And of that, if you look at the federal indicators, typically you look at 5 to 15%. That would be in a range of 48 to 145. So we're over that amount this year. And what we're wondering about, and we'll continue to look at, of the 280, is this due to the loss of skill that might have happened during closure? Could this be, there could be various reasons. Was it due to being hybrid this year? Was it due to themselves being not well at home, or the remote versus in person? So there's so many factors that we're looking at, but I did think that was important to note that we have close to 300 students this summer.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, questions? Dr.
I have
McGee?
a lot of questions. First of all, going with the students with IEPs, how did you qualify them? How did you pull those out of the nearly 1,000 students and say these particular ones need more care?
So that refers back to the anecdotal notes and the data collection that our staff do with the
Okay.
students. So when they come in to school in the fall, all staff know that they take baseline information regarding their students, like all teachers do. And then what we do is we actually monitor that after any break in education. So it could be long weekends, vacations, and they do, again, a collection of information around the goals and objectives to see how the student is doing. So
Okay.
we do this up until March, and then once March comes, that paperwork then comes in as whether or not the student has met one of the categories of regression, recoupment, critical stages, or nature and severity of disability.
So this is contemporary information that you've actively collected.
All
And
year,
the
right.
5 to 15% number from DESE or whoever, that is probably some classical number from the past. It really isn't a number that was developed in consideration of the uniqueness of this period of time we've got.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Ms. Clouder. If you can give me a big idea as to the capacity of this program, as far as the in-person piece, if I understand it correctly, we're looking at less than 1,000 students, is that correct?
That's the number.
As I look at all the grades, every number was under 100.
Yes, we're looking to prioritize the students that we think would most benefit
Sure.
from additional support.
And
And that relates to criteria for us too. So we looked at students, for example, not just students who aren't at benchmark, but are there 2 levels or below benchmark.
Right.
As our first list of priority.
And all of this is voluntary, and there are also online services available to everybody.
Yes.
And I guess the question is, when regular school starts in the fall, you're going to be testing students as they enter school to get a sense as to what level they're at. And you are, in some way, are you going to correlate this with whether or not they participated in this summer program? Are we going to have some information as to how these people sort out?
Yes, I'm hoping that the people who are helping to instruct in the program are going to have some exit information that then they keep for us to share with the receiving classroom teacher in the fall.
Yeah, and is there coordination within the town regarding you knowing who took these library programs or the park and rec programs? Are you going to be able to roll that into your thought process?
So that's on one of my future agendas. I'm trying to get a meeting with the town representatives to kind of think about that. In terms of the number of students that have library cards, we made a really big push last year to partner with Priya and her team to figure out how many of our students have library cards, how tricky is the library card process, can we make it simpler? And they were wonderful about kind of making that easier. This year, they're really promoting an app called Beanstack. There's 2 different versions for younger kids and older kids, and Brian is very graciously kind of agreed to work on figuring out how we can preload that to the extent possible. It's free. It doesn't seem to require a whole lot on the user end in terms of information, but I think anything we can do to set kids up for success before the summer break begins, we're going to try to do that.
Can I ask 2 more questions? One is, do we have a sense when students come back in the fall, Do we have a sense as to what they've done over the summer, if the parents have privately arranged for some summer enrichment? Again, just trying to figure out what people are doing and what works.
I think we do have that sense anecdotally. We could probably do a better job of gathering that information, particularly if it seems like we're gonna have the ability to structure summer programming, getting feedback from families around what were some of the strengths of this first go and what we
Yeah.
need to kind of shore up will be really important. But yes, I'm sure that there's a whole panoply of things. You know, if you think at the high school level, for example, one of the frustrations in trying to offer enrichment programs there is that there's so many enrichment options available for kids that they, you know, want to highlight, like the John Hopkins internship opportunities and, you know, courses at MIT. You wouldn't want to say, you know, don't go to MIT, come work with us, because there's such a range. And that's, the same thing is true. Some families will choose things based on their schedules. And so there might be really good reasons or good alternatives that families are supporting their students in need, but not in this way. And so I do think there's an opportunity for us to gather information. If you say no, why are you saying no?
Yeah.
You know, what's
And-
your
And
alternative
figure out what
plan?
works and what people are actually doing. Do we have enough money to all this? It seems like the money we're getting from the government is fairly modest.
So we have to spend a certain proportion of our funding, and Mr. Collins, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 250,000. I've estimated that if we can fully staff things in the ratio we have, that our summer program for Gen Ed will cost in the range of $100,000. So that leaves a healthy portion for making sure that we can fund tutors in the coming year. You know, who knows kind of what will follow, or, you know, there's no limit per se on us being able to do more than that. But I think one of the opportunities that we're really looking forward to leverage, and when I talked about hastening things that were already in the works, we've already been targeting kind of how we support kids and how we can do that more consistently is a really shared district goal. And so some of the materials that we've purchased for use in the general ed summer program, they're not going to sit on the shelf waiting for the next summer. We're going to use them. So to me, that's money very well spent. Because if a family or a student chooses not to come to the summer program, we'll catch them later.
Yeah, terrific, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Heffernan?
Yeah, I appreciate all of Dr. McGee's questions, and this is really important information and has the potential to be confusing for families because it's two similar yet very different programs targeting different young people. I appreciate the question about costs and funding, and it feels important to say, if I think I have this right, this, Ms. Clouder, your program, I missed we call it summer programming? What is to differentiate, or do you
I
not
have
have a
said to
name?
my colleagues that I could use some help thinking of an
Need a
alternative
branding.
name.
Okay,
Because I
well,
can think about what I don't want to call it.
Yeah, all right, I'm not asking you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot for that. When you get it,
Yeah.
that's fine, but the program for, let's say, general education students for the summertime
Yeah.
doesn't have a tuition or expense to it, that the students who are
Absolutely not.
invited. So I wanted to also differentiate an important thing that was mentioned in here, but probably a lot of parents haven't cued in on, is that we are not running our traditional summer enrichment program, which summer's about 10 weeks, and that was 7 or 8 weeks of opt-in tuition-based programs that many of our educators helped to run and were paid to run, but parents paid tuition to go to, and also certainly, I'm sure subsidized, or was helping many parents who are working in the summer, you know, had different goals, but important. Is it fair to say that one of the reasons that we're not running that program is because we have 300 students with IEPs who are interested in a program? You said you want 100 teachers or staff to be supporting that, and we have another 50 odd or so on this side, so that we're hoping, because we need so many teachers to kind of run these programs, is that part of our thinking, or is it a space constraint, or what? I'm just wondering, also,
it's
because the gen ed program, as exciting as it is, it's a 3-week program, and parents who are thinking 10 weeks is a long time for my kid, what are some other options, and historically have leaned on us as providing interesting, creative, wonderful. My daughter was in a pirates program, and they did reading, and they did all sorts of interesting things about pirates for a week, right? So could you just talk about some of the thinking behind what we're doing there, or why we're not doing that?
Sure. I think part of it was based on what have been the response rate for programs that we've run in the summer in the past, and what do families seem to, and I think probably this is also from a student perspective, right? Because there's this fine line of inviting students to participate in a program and also the feelings engendered in students if they're invited to come to school, and not all students are. So what seems to be the right fit in terms of the amount of programming, knowing that if we could run a program all summer long, which I would find really difficult to staff, I'm sure,
Sure.
that even in itself wouldn't be sufficient to close all of the gap for students. So how can we engage them as learners, make it exciting to get the help that they need, and focus that as much as possible, and kind of shore them up and help them transition back into a successful academic year. And 3 weeks seem to be the sweet spot to allow for enriching activities in the summer, family vacation time, focused here, and then kind of easing back into the year. When we looked at longer programs, we ran into both staffing concerns and also kind of competition for other family priorities, for lack of a better word. So in the past, for example, we've had Title I programming that ran 2 weeks, and families would commit to 2 weeks, and some proportion of families would only show up for one.
Gotcha.
And so we just didn't want that to happen if we were building it. We wanted to make sure that we could get as much interest as possible and really leverage the time that we had, as opposed to lengthening it and feeling like we didn't have all the seats filled.
Sure.
I think if I could jump in as well in terms of the question about why we're not running the traditional enrichment program. Part of that was we had to make a decision based on our timing for our planning for that back in essentially January. And there was just too many unknowns about what the summer was going to look like, knowing we would have to run some kind of, learning recovery program, for lack of a better word, and also not being able to commit to people who would want to, typically, staff members would put forward programmings that get approved, and then we would
Yep.
advertise them and that kind of thing. So both for fairness for families, so they can make other arrangements if those are possible, as well as to, in terms of space, obviously, we have more schools, but, space is at a premium in the summer because of all the renovation and cleaning work that the Public Buildings Department's doing. I do hope and expect that in the summer of 2022, we'll be returning to some sort of more traditional enrichment program. But it would not surprise me if, again, some of the things that we're adapting here, primarily as a result of the pandemic, and that is funded through some stimulus money that's going to not last year over year.
Right.
But there may be some things we choose to do to invest as a school district, to be able to provide that. We've done these kinds of things in the past. We certainly have provided support for English language learners in the summer. We've provided support for kids reading through the Title I program. So it's not the first time we're doing any kind of academic recovery. There's always been credit recovery work at the high school, which has been increasingly more and more online kinds of programs even before COVID. So I think this is an opportunity for us to do something that's very specific to our needs right now, learn some lessons from it. But unfortunately, we didn't have the capacity or the timing to be able to say, okay, we're going to run our enrichment program, and trying to scramble to do that now just wouldn't be fair to anybody, and probably would dilute the availability of people to participate in this as well.
I really appreciate that, and I think it underscores any one of these requires so much planning, all right? And you're running different and distinct programs, summer enrichment, the idea of we're starting in January to figure that all out, and people who, like I said, are now, the weather's warm, thinking, what am I doing over the summer? Those were decisions that we had to make a while ago, and I'm certainly supportive of the investment, but wanting to make sure the community understands sort of why we're making some of the choices that we're making here. But that's really, really helpful to understand. And just say for me one more time, on the general ed side, when would or did families get notified that they would be invited to participate, or it hasn't
They
happened yet?
haven't yet. We've
Coming-
just finished scrubbing the lists
Okay, so if they're going to be invited, they would know in the next few weeks?
the next week.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate that.
Ms. Fritz?
I had a question also around the financing, because if I understand from the ESSER grant dollars, that, Amy, you're talking about 100,000 for the gen ed, and the rest you're talking would go through the regular school year, maybe tutors or whatever. So it wouldn't be used to offset that increase in your program for the special ed piece in the summer.
Correct.
So
Two separate.
financially, we're looking at a significant bump up from last summer in number of students, from last summer to this summer, or historically over.
It's actually, in looking at it tonight, not that far off from the numbers of past years.
Okay, because I thought you said 145 to 280, but no.
So
it's-
140, that range is actually what the federal government has
Okay.
basically indicated as what you typically see for extended school year programs, between 5 and 15%. And based on the number of students we have in special education, close to 1,000, that would have been 48 to 145. Our numbers right now is around 280. So it's just, another data point for us to take a look at and see what that looks like historically and moving forward.
Or in prior summers, not last summer, because that was an anomaly, but the summer before, maybe close to 280 is what we had typically.
Yeah, it's gone down a little bit over the past few years, but it's still above the average.
Okay, so from a budget standpoint, we're okay, you're thinking we're keeping, okay.
Yes. And our number, when I mentioned 600,000, we also combined transportation in that, correct, Pat? Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why she might say $100,000, but that's not including the busing.
I'm just
so-
talking staffing.
Yeah, staffing,
So
yeah.
there's, some other
Right.
factors that, we put together for an extended school year program. So there's different pieces that will look a little different right now.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. First off, thank you for the report. I think summer programming is always critical to the growth of our students, and I think the moment that we're in, it's even more important as a service to mitigate, the impact the pandemic has had on the school district, certainly, and the many unknowns that we have pertaining to impacts on learning remote for the last 14 months. I also think it's a great reminder that this is a year-round operation, right? It's not just, fall, winter, and spring. The work continues into the summer in response to the post-pandemic needs of the students is really just beginning. Our students are in great hands, obviously, as we can see, and I do agree with Ms. Clouder. This is a work in progress, right? I mean, if you think back, the last maybe normal, summer program was back in 2019, right? So very much a rebuilding year for the program, certainly targeting specific needs, and definitely continue to ask for the community's patience, flexibility, and grace around this as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Sawyer.
I just want to thank Ms. Clouder, Ms. Belcito, and their teams for the planning that's happened. I'm quite confident that this will be high-quality work, programming that will benefit our students. I think we're taking a smart approach to it, and I think that really thinking in terms of trying to identify students who will benefit, making sure we're providing things that do not feel like drudgery to them, but that do help them gain some of the skills and knowledge that will help them be in a stronger place when the regular school year resumes. And at the same time, do it in a way that is likely to hopefully, attract enough staff to make it work and after a very difficult year and other commitments that staff typically make in the summer. So I think that they're being very thoughtful in their approach, and I look forward to seeing the outcome. And I think as we continue to get into more opportunities for data collection, to Dr. McGee's point, if there are ways we can find out, again, what's effective, and that's both based on our own experiences as well. I think we're seeing, I'm not sure, I must have 100 emails in my inbox every day about, the newest this or that about learning recovery, and there's some reputable, organizations and think tanks and governmental entities that are, I think, doing some good research or basing what their recommendations are on good research. And that's we're always incumbent upon us to make sure we're looking at what's best practice in the field. So we're looking forward to it, and we appreciate all the work that's happening to make this possible.
Great, thank you, Dr.
And
Sawyer.
on the enrichment note, I'm grateful to all of the people on the district leadership team who have helped kind of create the vision and form the lists of students, but also to Karen Isaacson, who right now is serving in a different function that's just as vital to reopening, but lent me a lot of expertise in thinking through some of the logistics of building a program, because as you noted, she does that very well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from our April 28th, 2021 general session. Colleagues, any revisions or corrections? There being none, they will be approved as written. And tonight, we do need to adjourn into executive session. for the purposes of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose 7, open meeting law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22FG, for the purpose of reviewing, approving, and/or releasing executive session minutes. And B, for the purposes of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect of the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Purpose 3, the Shrewsbury Education Association, Unit A, or B, for Shrewsbury Paraprofessional Association and/or the Cafeteria Workers Association, and C, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Purpose 2, non-represented administrators. May I have a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote is required. Mr. Powich?
Aye.
Dr. McGee?
Aye.
Ms. Heffernan?
Aye.
Ms. Fritz?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you and good night.